Okay, so today's story time was sent in by an anonymous user. Story time about the guy who pretended to be gay in high school to get closer to all the girls. I know you guys have been waiting for that one. Yep. So a little background information. When my friends and I first met this kid, we were in middle school. And he was one of the popular kids. And he actually used to bully me and my friends. So fast forward, I was 15 and it was the first day of my freshman year in high school. So later on in the day, my friends and I, we were all sitting at lunch, and we're gonna call this boy Alex, when Alex had came and sat at our lunch table. Now, our lunch table had like 6 seats, and me and my other 3 friends, we were all sitting on this side, so he had sat right at the end. Very awkwardly too, just like kind of slammed his tray down and sat there just looking at us. Giving me creepy vibes. But okay. I was trying to ignore this kid because he literally bullied me in middle school and I did not want to ask him what was wrong or why he was sitting with us. But after 10 minutes of him not saying anything and really just staring at us, like, it looked like he was eavesdropping too, I finally asked him why he wasn't sitting with his friends. And at first he had said that his friends were just being jerks, but of course I didn't really care. I was just asking him because I wanted to know why the hell he was listening in on my friends and I's conversations. Plus, there were literally like 10 other empty open tables. No reason for him to come and sit with us. Like, you can't just bully someone for like 2 years and then go sit at their table and expect them to be nice to you. Sis, who do you think you are walking around with that kind of attitude? Ridiculous. So we just kept ignoring him, and then out of nowhere he's like, well, to be honest, they don't want to be friends with me anymore since I came out as gay. Plot twist, we were not expecting that. Nope. Because this kid literally used to brag in 8th grade about how many girls he would get. I remember those kids. They were always weird. So we looked over at his friends' table and they were all just looking over and laughing at us. They had also bullied us too in middle school. So my best friend Julie, she goes over to their table and she starts yelling at all of them and pretty much makes a scene. Like, the whole lunchroom was looking at Julie. So after that, the security guard came over, took her to the office, and she got in-school suspension for trying to be a good person, you know, just sticking up for this kid who had bullied us. Which I'm pretty sure now she regrets doing that, but you know what? She was a good freaking person. Well, I'll be back once they are done doing whatever the hell they are doing. So every day after that, he started sitting at our lunch table. And low-key, I felt bad because we would all make plans in front of him and we wouldn't invite him because we still knew him as the kid who bullied us in middle school. Even though we were getting to know him more and stuff like that, it was still just very weird and awkward for us. So the one day while we were sitting at lunch, he had asked us if we all wanted to hang out. So of course we said yeah, and we all decided to go to my house, which my house was usually where my friends and I would hang out anyways. So everybody got on my bus and we went to my house, started hanging out, and on the weekends my parents would let me drink. So we were all drinking, having a super good time, and my friend Julie was just one of those people to bring up shit that was awkward, but she didn't care. She was like confrontational. Like, if she had a problem with you, you would know because she would have already told you. But anyways, Julie says to Alex, I think it's funny all of a sudden how you want to hang out with us, yet you used to bully us in middle school. And me, Megan, and Danny, we're just sitting there like, what the actual, like, this girl, she just made everything awkward. Like, sis woke up every day and chose violence. So he starts crying, like literally bawling his eyes out, and he's like, honestly, like, the only reason why I did it was so that way I would look cool in front of my friends, and I've always been jealous of how good of friends you guys are. Like, he sounded really genuine and like he actually meant it. So after that, we all pretty much had a moment together, you know. We were like, it's okay, you know, like, you have good friends now, you know, we'll never treat you the way that we'll never treat you the way that they did. So naturally we started hanging out with him more and we started getting closer to him, and he actually seemed like a really nice kid. Like, he seemed very genuine. And me, Danny, Julie, and Megan, we all had like a different type of friendship with him. if that makes sense. Like, I want to say that he was closer with Julie than any of us, but he would be really nice to Gabby. You would have thought that he had a crush on Gabby because of how sweet he was with her and stuff like that. I want to say all of us were comfortable with him except for Megan. Megan had like the biggest issue with him. Like, she would always say that he gave her like weird vibes. But if I'm being honest, it's only because her older brother was gay and she thought that everybody who was gay had to be like very flamboyant. But it got to the point where she didn't even want to be around him. Like, she stopped coming to our sleepovers. She even stopped sitting at our lunch table. And she had told me the reason besides the thing about her brother was they had a few classes together and he would act totally different in those classes than he would whenever he was around me, Danny, and Julie. Apparently, he would still hang out with the friends that would make fun of him all the time. And overall, he would just be super mean to her in class. Anyways, let me give you an idea of the type of friendship that we had with him. When we would hang out with him, to be honest, it was just like having another girl a part of our friend group. We were fine with getting dressed in front of him because he said that he was gay. Of course, we didn't think that he was looking at our tatas or anything like that. Even though he would still ask really weird questions like, oh, have you guys ever sent nudes? Or have you ever done anything with a guy? But we just brushed it off because we had just thought that he was being curious, you know? Anyway, so 2 months goes past. We start getting very close to him. We start telling him things that nobody knew about us. Like, for example, my friend Julie, she had been born with both private parts, and she felt comfortable enough to come out and tell that to him, which is something that she had only told us 5 years after she knew us. So I guess you could say him and Julie were getting pretty close. But like I said earlier, that's just the type of friendship they had. They were closer than any of us were to him. So a little bit about Megan. Even though she didn't really like Alex, she would still hang out with us just whenever he wasn't around. But the one day I was in my science class, no. Ugh. Anyways, well, the one day I was in my science class and I get a text from Megan. It's a picture of Alex at a party kissing some girl, and his old group of friends are right behind him. Later on that day at lunch, I was showing it to Julie and Danny whenever Alex comes over and sits down, and he's like, oh, what are you guys looking at? And when I show him the picture, he's like, OMG, that's from 2 years ago. Like, how did you guys get that? And I didn't tell him that Megan had sent it to me because their friendship was already a little rocky, and to be honest, I just thought she sent me that picture either not knowing that it was from 2 years ago or just trying to get us to stop being friends with him. Well, the one day we had all been on FaceTime, and out of nowhere Alex says, oh, I've never seen boobs before. Just like weirdly out of nowhere. And I'm like, oh, well, just like look up a picture, you know? So he looks up a picture and he sends a picture into our group chat and he's like, ooh, is this really what they look like? And he sent a picture in of like some botched boob job, I guess. And Julie's like, no, come on the camera. And she lifts up her shirt and she shows him her boobs. And Danny does the same thing. So I just decided to do it too. So we all lift up our shirts and we show him our boobs. And we were on FaceTime, so we didn't know if he screenshotted it, but we trusted him. You know, we were like, this kid's really not gonna screenshot our boobs. Like, he's freaking gay. So a few days after that, while I was in school, I saw him walking around with the group of friends that he had said made fun of him. So after that, I start to believe Megan. I'm sitting there and I'm like, why would you be walking around with kids that make fun of you for who you are? So he goes to sit with us at lunch and I tell him, oh no, you can go sit with your friends. And he was like, what do you mean? And I'm like, oh, well, I saw you walking around with them in the hallway earlier. And he was like, no, like, I was just talking to them about how I needed my cleats back. Like, they still had them and they weren't giving them back to me, so my mom and I are going over there after school to go and get them. So giving him the benefit of the doubt, I believe him, and I just decided that I'm gonna keep an eye on him after that situation. But after that, he started hanging out with us more than he was before. Like, anytime after class, he would meet us at our classes and stuff like that. Like, this kid was up our asses to try try and gain our trust back, I guess. But he wouldn't even go near his old group of friends anymore. Like, Megan said that he stopped sitting with those kids in the classes that they had together. So she started coming around us more and stuff like that, and actually started to become friends with him again. Because she was friends with him at first, but that was before he started hanging out with his old group of friends during class and stuff like that. This kid would even come in the locker room before gym class while we were all getting dressed. The teacher didn't really care though because he was gay. And also, very weirdly enough, he started acting way more flamboyant than he was before. I don't know if it's because he didn't feel comfortable or he was like trying to prove to us that he was gay, which he didn't have to do at all, but whatever floats your boat, kid. Another quick thing, nobody knew that this kid was gay. It was only me and my group of friends and his old group of friends, which I thought was completely weird, but then again, not really, because sometimes it's hard for people to come out. That was a little sus to us, but we kind of just left that alone and let him deal with that. So fast forward, the one weekend, everybody was busy except for me and Danny, so her and I decided to have a sleepover with just each other. And while we were hanging out, she brought up how Alex was texting her and begging her to do the nasty with him. And at first I didn't believe her. I'm like, OMG, like, he has to be kidding, you know? Like, I doubt that he would actually say that. Like, he's gay. No chance in hell he wants to do the nasty with any of us, or he's interested in any of our lady parts. So she had let me go through their conversations, and surely enough, he was begging her to do it with him. He was pretty much saying things like, they said the only reason why I'm gay is because I can't get with any girls. Just a bunch of other mean stuff like that. And basically the rest of their conversation just pretty much went like she would say no, and he just kept asking her why. Like, he was very almost forceful on why she would not do the nasty with him. And not to mention, she was a virgin. She had never done anything with anybody before, and doing the nasty was like a big deal to her, which is understandable because it's like that for a lot of people. So the next weekend, all of us had a sleepover at my house, and by the way, my parents didn't really care if he slept over or hung out at my house because they knew that he was gay. But everybody was downstairs watching a movie, and Alex and I were up in my bedroom finishing up some homework when I decided to bring up the fact that Danny showed me their conversations. Can I just butt in here real quick? There were already so many red flags about this kid. He gave y'all so many signs. Anyways, back to the story. So like I had said, I told him about Danny showing me the conversation, and he was like, OMG, I'm so sorry. I was super drunk that night, letting everything that my old friend said get to me. He was like, even though I'm not friends with them, I still care what they think about me. And then I explained to him that he can't just repeatedly ask a girl to do the nasty when she doesn't want to. Like, that right there is giving me very much sus, not okay vibes at all. And he was like, yeah, I'm so sorry, like, I'll apologize to her, like I said, I was drunk, da 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 da, just a whole bunch of bullshit. So then after I had explained that to him, I was like, okay, well, why don't you just tell them that you did it with us? And he was like, well, they wouldn't believe me because they would be like, oh, show us proof, blah blah blah. So I was like, okay, hold on a minute, I'm gonna go downstairs, you wait up here. So I had went downstairs, and I told Danny that I talked to Alex about what he said to her the other night, and I was talking to Julie. Megan was also there because, like I said, she had started coming to our sleepovers again and stuff like that. And that was after I had the conversation with Alex about hanging out with his toxic ass friend group. So I was telling them about the conversation that I was having with Alex, and I was like, yeah, he says they won't believe him without proof. And Julie was like, well, why don't we just do it with him? And Megan and I look at each other and we're like, what do you mean, all of us? And she was like, yeah, why not? And I look at her and I'm like, did you not just hear about the conversation that I had with him about the way that he had talked to Danny the other night? And she was like, well, Danny doesn't have to if she doesn't want to. And surprisingly, Megan goes, yeah, well, he's already seen us all naked before. And I'm just like, sis, like, you just had a problem with this kid last week. So everybody except for Danny agrees. I agree too. I'm like, whatever, you know what? Let's get it going. So we all go upstairs, we sit around him in a circle, and he just stares at us and he's like, what are you guys doing? And Julie's like, well, we all heard about how your friends were saying that you needed proof that you could get with any girls and stuff like that. And then I'm gonna try to get through this part as fast as I can. Julie sets up her camera in the other side of the room, facing towards my bed, and we are all already unclothed at this point, except for him. And at this time, I want to say that it was around 1 in the morning, and we didn't really have to worry about my parents because my mom and my stepdad were cheating on each other anyway, so they were always out at the bars and stuff like that, in the casinos. So they were rarely home on the weekends. So I want to say like 20 minutes after we're getting into everything, Danny comes upstairs. She takes off her clothes and gets into it also. Oh my god, I don't feel comfortable talking about this. But yeah, she joins in, you know. Oh my god. So after that, we all fell asleep, and when we woke up, Alex was gone, which was not normal at all because usually he would stay for breakfast, the girls would leave, and then he would have to wait for my parents to get home from work to take him home because his dad worked on the weekends, so his mom didn't have a car to use to come pick him up. So we thought that was extremely weird. And another thing, he was not answering any of our texts throughout the day, and we weren't really worried though because Julie had never sent the video to him. So Sunday night, I'm getting ready for bed when I get a group FaceTime call from Julie, Megan, and Danny. And I get on the phone and Julie is freaking out, like really badly. She's like, gee, you guys know how I didn't send the video to him the night before? She was like, well, he went on my phone and he sent the video to himself. So we're all freaking out right now. So eventually Danny is able to get a hold of him, and when she does, he just says, what do you want? Like, no, hey, sorry, you know, my phone was dead or anything. He just said, what do you want? Like, what do you mean, what do I want? You just sent a video of all of us doing stuff that was nasty to yourself, and you've been ignoring us. What a douche. What a douche. Actually, hate men. Hate men. So the next day we go to school and we're looking for Alex before first period starts. And usually at this time, Alex would be waiting at the auditorium for us, but he wasn't there. Surprise, right? No. Sneaky little bastard. So we start walking to his locker, and while we're walking to his locker, we feel like low-key people are just staring at us. Well, at this time, Megan wasn't at school yet, but she had texted us and she was like freaking out. She was like, guys, look at Instagram right now. Like right now. Like, she sent a picture of her crying with her mascara running, saying she's not going to school today. And what do you know, we are tagged on this Instagram account, and let me break it down for you real quick. There's pictures of all of us lifting up our shirts on FaceTime. There were pictures of a bunch of other girls getting changed in the locker room before gym class. There were even pictures of girls in the showers after gym class. So we're all freaking out. Danny refreshes the page and the video of all of us pops up. Yup. And from the video, there is a zoomed in screenshot of Julie, and under the post, the caption was, now I can't say exactly what it said, but hopefully you guys get the gist. Those must be the scars from where they cut it off. Yeah. Once again, I hate men. Like, I would tell my dad. Y'all don't even want to know what my dad would do. Let's just say it would probably get him a life sentence. Anyways, so we all go to the guidance counselor. We tell her what's going on. We show her the Instagram page. We ended up going to the principal's office. They saw everything, as did everybody else in my school. They called our parents. The Instagram page was taken down. They went on his phone and deleted everything, even though we already knew that pretty much everybody had that shit by now. Not only that, but multiple other girls were involved, not just us four. Our gym teacher was on permanent leave, or whatever the heck it's called. I guess suspension, maybe. Not permanent, I don't know, but she was fired. She was fired, rightfully so. So pretty much after that, my parents decided to send me to a private school, and I was not allowed to be friends with Danny, Julie, or Megan anymore because they didn't want me associated with people like that, even though I literally did the same shit. And pretty much to close out this story time, my mom, my dad, my stepmom, and my stepdad all saw a video of me and my 5 friends doing it in my bedroom. The most beautiful diamond. You've
sky, the most beautiful diamond eyes I've ever seen in my whole life. The skyline is jealous, I'm looking at you, how you shine.
My best friend always projects her insecurities onto me. Should I break up with her? My best friend and I have known each other for exactly 2 years. We met in college and hit it off right away. We're both Latinas and we come from really big families. I have 2 other sisters and we get along really well. We always hype each other up and have each other's backs. A few months after I started my friendship with my best friend, let's call her Lucia. Lucia started showing some really toxic qualities. Sometimes I think I'm just reading too much into it or overreacting. So you let me know. First of all, she would start talking bad about my sisters in front of me. She would make comments like, wow, your sister's gained weight, or wow, your sister has cellulite. When she first did this, I would just defend my sisters, but then I realized that that just made her want to keep talking more trash. So if she ever said anything about my sisters, I wouldn't say anything. At the time our friendship started, I had a really big crush on this guy. He and I went to the same gym and I never had the courage to speak to him, not until my sister convinced me to. I finally spoke to him at the gym and we actually hit it off. We would work out together every now and then and he finally asked me out on a date. The day of our date, my best friend came over to my house, and while I was getting ready, she started saying really weird things. At first, she told me that I should wash my hair because it looked oily. I told her my hair was freshly washed. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I could see her reflection and she just rolled her eyes at me. This is when things started clicking. Part 2 is up. My best friend projects her insecurities on me. Should I break up with her? I could see through the mirror that she had rolled her eyes at me. Then she started making other comments about my appearance. Mind you, I'm getting ready for a date. When I showed her the outfit that I was gonna wear, she said it was too revealing and that I would probably scare him off. Wasn't even revealing, it just showed my legs. It was a cute sundress with a cardigan on top. I told her I thought I looked cute. And then she said, "Allá tu amiga." As I'm finishing up my hair and my makeup, she says, "Wow, you're gonna wear that much makeup?" But the way she said it was so aggressive, I actually took off the lipstick I was wearing. Instead, I just put on lip balm. I looked at her and she had a smile on her face. It was like she was happy she finally got to me. The date went really well and he actually turned into my boyfriend a few weeks later. And guess what? My best friend started judging everything about him. The first time she met him, she started saying, "Wow, I think he's balding," which he isn't. And even if he was, I wouldn't care. She also started making comments about him staring at other girls, something I never even noticed that he did, and I would know I'm with him all the time. It's like she was trying to plant all these insecurities in my head. One day, Lucia and my boyfriend and I are in his car. We were heading to the movie theaters when Lucia says, "Wow, you put on way too much perfume. It's giving me a headache." That's when my boyfriend told her that if it bothered her that much, she should just go home. And out of nowhere, Lucia swung her fist at him. She actually tried to attack him. Part 3 is up. My best friend always projects her insecurities on me. Should I break up with her? That's when she started swinging at my boyfriend. Luckily, I yelled at her and she stopped. It's like she was upset at me for yelling at her for trying to hit my boyfriend. That's when my boyfriend kicked her out of the car and I asked him to calm down. I got out of the car with Lucia and asked her to calm down. That's when she told me that I needed to break up with him and that he was clearly abusive. I told her he was just defending me. Then she said, "He doesn't need to defend you. I'm only saying this because I care about you." Then she called herself an Uber and left. My boyfriend and I went to the movie theaters and we had a really nice night. Here's some more examples of her projecting on me. While we were getting ready for a friend's birthday party, she started pointing out some stuff on my body. She said, "Your elbows are really dark. You need to fix that." Another time I decided to get some highlights and she said they looked horrible on me. She said I looked like a JLo wannabe. Luckily I didn't care and I just kept the highlights. Mind you, 2 months later she got the exact same highlights. Now, I know that she cares about me because she does have my back. She'll help me with anything I need, honestly. And I wonder if I'm overreacting, but I don't think so. I just don't know how to tell her that she's toxic because she makes me feel bad. What should I do?
Am I wrong for telling my son I was disappointed after he and his wife lied about my grandson's birth date? My son, 23, and his wife just had a baby boy. Everyone is overjoyed and excited, but there have been some issues that have risen recently. When my daughter-in-law was pregnant, I suggested that I host a welcoming party for my grandson right after she get discharged from the hospital. I've made arrangements and even emptied a room for them to stay, but for some reason she was against it and said she'd rather spend the first few weeks at home with her newborn. Not only that, but she said no to the welcoming party. My husband and I talked to my son and he said, "We'll see." But just a couple of days ago, we found out that my daughter-in-law had given birth 2 weeks ago and no one knew about it. My nephew told me and I immediately called my son. He confirmed it. I told him this was not acceptable, lying just because they didn't want a welcoming party and love and support being given from family. I told him I was disappointed because for one, he ruined our welcoming for our grandbaby, and also I invited family members and they're all rightfully disappointed as well. He said it was his last resort after I kept pushing and made his wife uncomfortable, but that was not appreciated because we were just trying to celebrate the new family member in a proper manner. We had an argument and he ended the call upon saying I ruined his joy for his newborn. My husband started texting him since he stopped replying to our phone calls and is now threatening to block my nephew for tattling battling, but I think that my nephew was decent enough to inform the family. Otherwise, God knows how long my son and his wife were going to hide their son just to keep us at arm's length. We've always been kind and welcoming to my daughter-in-law and her family. I don't know why she would do this and disrespect the family like that. On the other hand, some family members see it as a justified action because we insisted on the party. I don't know if you know this, man, but we are in the middle of a panoramic, and so I understand not wanting to expose your kids to people who you don't know where they've been when kids have such a compromised immune system.
Am I the asshole for making my parents live without electricity for a week? I, 26 female, was always into sports, science, and other things my parents thought were too strenuous for a young girl. I took coding in school and went on to the computer science in university. My parents were disapproving because they thought being a teacher would be a better career path for a girl. They also thought it'd be hard for me to find a husband because men would hate that I had male coworkers. I wanted to be child-free and travel, and they wanted me to marry, have kids, and quit my job to be a housewife. This caused us to break contact for a few years, but we recently started communicating again. Recently, my parents were having issues with electricity, and I said I would take a look. Am I the asshole for making my parents live without electricity for a week? I drove 3 hours, and the first thing my dad said to me was, "Couldn't you dress nicer?" I'm in jeans, a green jacket with my hair in a bun because I'm literally going to be doing work. I was pissed but let it go because he's always been critical of my clothing, my weight as a size 4, and other things he doesn't think are feminine enough. Their house is from 1940, so the wiring is old and definitely not up to code. I start Googling and my mom complains I'm playing on the computer when I should be helping them. I said I was, and she smugly said I shouldn't have gone into engineering if I didn't know how to do the work. I walked out, and when they asked why, I said I'm just a weak little girl who can't possibly help. Am I the asshole for firing the babysitter for being a bad influence? My wife and I hired a babysitter, Adeline, 18, for our kids a few months ago. She's great with them and is the only babysitter that can handle so many young kids, being 2 female, 4 female, 5 male, and 7 female. A couple problems are that she's constantly late. Usually no more than 5 minutes, but it's still irritating. Another thing is, after she puts everyone to bed, she spends the rest of the night on her phone or laptop. She never cleans up in the playroom because she claims it's always messy and she doesn't know where anything goes. So she'll only go ahead and clean up what she did with the kids.
I have 3 daughters, Alyssa 18, Tessa 16, and Jenna 14. We rarely argue. She drives her sisters around and she works full-time while in school. The only problem is that she can be unreliable. If you ask her to get groceries and be home at 5, she'll call you at 6:30 and ask you what you wanted her to do. And she doesn't do housework without being reminded 5 times. She has ADHD though, so that explains it. Now Jenna loves to argue. Jenna argues with my husband a few times a week. She's a pretty good kid otherwise. She's a straight A student, she plays soccer and is playing softball, and she helps around the house more than both of her sisters combined. Tessa is complicated. When she applies herself, she gets straight A's extremely easy. The problem is, she never does her homework, so she usually gets B's and C's. She and I have similar hobbies, and both my husband and I love talking to her when she's in a good mood. We don't fight often, but when we do, it's very dramatic. She's been insisting that she has ADHD or some other problem since she was around 11 because she can't focus, but my husband and I think that she's just trying to get shorter assignments and extra time like Alyssa. We got into an argument the other day because she has IBD and gets infusions every 6 weeks. She's very strict about never pushing it back for any reason after we tried to push it back once because we were going to be in another state and she got sick at 6 weeks and 3 days. It was 2 years ago and she's healthier now, but she still refuses to push it back. Her next infusion is scheduled for the 1st, but we're going to be on vacation from the 30th to the 4th, so I scheduled her infusion for the 8th. Her doctor approved it, but she started yelling at me about how last time I pushed her infusion back, she got sick and she isn't going to risk her health from our vacation. It became a very long and drawn out argument. When I picked her up from school, she put her headphones on so that she wouldn't have to talk to me, and then she locked herself in her room. She borrowed my laptop, so I looked in her backpack to see if she still had it. While I was looking, I saw passes from the school therapist. Tessa knows I don't want her talking to those therapists because people will find any reason to call CPS. Tessa admitted that she'd been seeing the therapist once a week for 2 years. She wouldn't look up at me from her coloring book and started crying and asked me to give it back because her therapist gave it to her for when she was having a bad day. I ended up shredding it and she hasn't left her room except for school and hasn't spoken since, so I wanted to know if I was the asshole. So, am I the asshole for shredding my daughter's coloring book? I, 24, have been with my fiance 24 for 7.5 years. We started dating our senior year of high school. He has always said that he was waiting to propose until we had enough money for a wedding. I always told him that I would go to the courthouse or have a very small wedding. He was the one that wanted a big party. There was also his family drama that held him back because he was hoping to mend his relationship with his family before getting married so that they could attend. Long story short, he finally realized that his parents weren't going to be civil and they are no longer in our lives. I began anticipating him proposing after that. He finally did this past Christmas. It felt like we were finally moving forward with our lives. After he proposed, I realized I did indeed want a real wedding, though still something small. He again was trying to make it bigger than what I wanted or what we could afford. He said that we should be celebrating our lives together after all the pain and drama we had put up in our lives. So I began planning a wedding. My father works at a private golf course and they offered to use a venue for a fraction of the cost. I don't have the exact numbers yet, but they waived the site fee, $5,000. I get all the enhancements for free, which is a $2,500 value, and I don't have to have their minimum person count. We're essentially paying for the food and drink and will still be given a discounted price. On top of that, my grandparents and parents are planning on chipping in. I really imagine my fiance and I only paying about $5,000 out of pocket for DJ and attire. And I plan on having people gift money for a house instead of items for wedding gifts. To me, this wedding is important and is a dream wedding that I thought I'd never be able to afford. But my fiance thinks that we should scrap it all and focus on buying a house in the next 2 to 3 years. But that we could get married at the courthouse, even though it was his idea for a big wedding. And maybe have a wedding after we buy a house. So to me, this means that I won't have a wedding for another 5-ish years, and who knows if my dad will still be at this job or have this amazing offer. Am I being unreasonable for wanting this wedding?
My boyfriend went on a vacation with his ex behind my back. Should I break up with him? Disclaimer, I look extremely tired because I've been filming for 7 hours. I'm not sad, don't worry. Storytime was sending me an Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been together for 6 months only. Here's the thing, we never bring up our exes, like ever. From my perspective, I thought we had a really healthy relationship. We're both really into fitness, would work out together every single day, and we made time to cook together every single day. He asked me to move in with him 2 months after we started dating, but I said no. I explained to him that I just wasn't ready for that, and he got really upset. That's when things started changing. He began making up excuses about not being able to hang out with me, and sometimes he wouldn't even show up to our gym dates. And I guess one of the mistakes that I made was giving him his space. A few days later, he calls me and tells me that he is in Boston for a work trip. He didn't even tell me he was going on a trip. I just said okay. Then I tracked his location on my phone and it turns out he's in the Bahamas. He forgot that I could track his location. I started investigating and you'll never guess what I found. Part 2 is up. My boyfriend went on vacation with his ex behind my back. Should I break up with him? Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's on my Instagram. Also, I'm just really tired from filming. I'm not sad, I promise. After checking his location and seeing that he was actually in the Bahamas and not Boston where he told me he was going, started doing some investigating on Instagram. I scanned his Instagram for people that he tagged, and I finally came across his ex's profile. No, I had never done this before just because I didn't care about his ex. Like I said in part 1, we never talked about our exes. Fortunately, her account was set to private, so I couldn't see her pictures or stories. But I did see on her bio that she was currently in the Bahamas. From his location, I could see what hotel he was staying at. So I called the hotel and asked for his room number. And they put me through. My boyfriend answered the phone. And the first words out of his mouth were, "How did you find me here?" I told him I could see his location and that he must have forgotten. That's when he came up with his lie. His boss asked him to go to the Bahamas for emergency business, and that he didn't have time to call me and tell me about it. In the background, I could hear that somebody opened the door and I heard a woman's voice. He instantly hung up on me. So I called his phone, but he wouldn't answer. In fact, he turned his phone off. It wasn't until 4 days later that he actually showed up to my apartment apologizing. He said his phone broke and that he couldn't get one while he was in the Bahamas. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend went on vacation with his ex behind my back. Should I break up with him? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I sent me an Instagram. After 4 days of not hearing from my stupid boyfriend who was in the Bahamas, finally showed up to my apartment to apologize. I told him not to even bother because I knew that he was with his ex. Then he said, "You're right. I'm not even gonna lie to you." Then he came up with this whole story. He clearly had 4 days to think about it. Told me that his ex-girlfriend's boyfriend died and that she was in need of his help. She asked him to go to the Bahamas to spread her boyfriend's ashes. And of course, being the gentleman that he is, he said yeah. And that the only reason he didn't tell me was because he didn't want me to get jealous. So I asked him to confirm his story. I told him to call his ex and put her on speaker, and he refused. He said that I was being toxic and that doing that to his poor ex would bring up all the feelings she had from her boyfriend's death, and that she was grieving and I needed to respect her space. Gaslighting much? I told him I wouldn't believe him and then I kicked him out. He told me I was being so insensitive towards him. So I asked his ex on Instagram if the whole story was true. She hasn't opened the message and I'm still waiting for her to reply. It's been a few days since that happened and my boyfriend keeps coming back to my apartment with flowers and champagne. He keeps apologizing and asking me not to break up with him. I know you're all thinking I should just leave him, but I really, really love him. And maybe the story is true. He shouldn't have lied. I can't confirm his story. What should I do?
I'm 16 and my stepbrother is 16, we'll call him H, and my dad 44 and his mom 33 started dating 2 years ago and married 1 year ago. They also moved in with us a year ago. My stepbrother and I go to the same school, we're both in year 11, however we're polar opposites. I'm upper middle class, pretty slim, popular, devout Catholic, well-behaved, etc. And he's working class, quite chubby, atheist. He's also popular, however he's your typical working class punk teen who has been arrested multiple times and constantly misbehaves. The school we go to is in northern England and is overwhelmingly working class, so it's a miracle that I've managed to fit in. Now to the point. Since they moved in, my dad and stepmom and my 2 youngest step-siblings have converted to Catholicism. However, H has refused. He said he was raised atheist and refuses to convert to Catholicism. This creates alienation in our family with him being the odd one out. A lot of the time he's out sleeping on his friend's couch or he's confined to his room because my dad and stepmom always pester him about his religious beliefs. They try to force him to convert to Catholicism by threatening consequences if he doesn't go to church, however nothing has worked. Today we were in English class. I'm in the same form group as H, and H was talking about how my dad nicked his mom and turned her into a religious nutcase. He also spoke about how he resents both my dad and his mom for trying to force him to assimilate to the church and alienating him just because he doesn't want to. I pretended not to hear him, however, I secretly wrote everything he was saying down with the intention of showing my stepmom and dad. When I got home later that day after school, I usually always get there before him because he's pissing about with his mates most of the time. I showed stepmom and dad what he had said. They were both livid and rang H up demanding that he come home immediately. When he got home, dad and stepmom shouted at him and demanded that he come to their room to talk. I put my ear on the door to listen, and they told him that he was no longer allowed in the house and disowned him. That was a bit harsh in my opinion, however, when H came out, he didn't look fussed at all, and he said that he'll just go sleep on his friend's couch. He's been gone for a couple hours now, and his stepmom and dad have received a lot of backlash from his aunt, uncle, cousins, extended family, etc. on my stepmom's side of the family, so he must have gotten in touch with his extended family about the incident. I have mixed feelings about this, because I feel guilty for getting him kicked out, however, I think that stepmom and dad deserve to know that H resents them and dubs them as religious nutcases. Am I the asshole for getting my stepbrother kicked out of the house? My boyfriend, 31, in the past had a binge drinking problem before we met. By the time we met, he had been sober for years but had cirrhosis on his liver that doesn't look to be getting any better and had some really bad lab results. He also had an embolism in his lungs, so had reduced lung function and diabetes. He went to a liver specialist who mentioned that my boyfriend might need a liver transplant in the future, and he came back pretty bummed out about that, understandably. He then, not seriously, but kind of hopefully let me know that I should donate part of my liver to him if we match. I told him no, and I was kind of in shock that he would ask. We've only been dating for 8 months, and while I like him, I'm not convinced he's the one yet. He has a lot of qualities that I like, but some of them drive me up the wall, including having poor personal hygiene and not looking after his diet and eating mostly fast food, which probably is what causes diabetes. He was surprised and then tried to cover it up by saying he didn't expect it and he was just joking. I felt like he was being serious but didn't want to seem that way, and I told him that I would only think about doing something so personal for a parent, sibling, or a spouse, and only if we were on good terms. He then joked that he could just ask me to marry and take my liver, and I told him that now he's mentioned it, it would make any marriage proposal seem disingenuous, so I wouldn't get matched to see if I was a candidate beforehand. He got serious and told me that the liver isn't a big transplant and I would still be able to keep part of my liver. I told him that it doesn't matter that the liver regenerates, I wouldn't even think about doing it just for a boyfriend. He got offended and said that he would do it for me if the situation was reversed, and I said that the problem is the situation isn't reversed, so I'm not convinced he would do it just because he's spouting platitudes. He got really angry and stormed out of the house, and he hasn't been back in hours. Am I the asshole for being overly honest with him and telling him that I wouldn't donate my liver to him? I live with a roommate and her 3-year-old child. My roommate is a 4th-year medical student and is really struggling, having to balance with the child, intense study workload, chores and part-time jobs to afford rent, babysitter and necessities. On the day of the biggest exam of her entire degree, her babysitter canceled last minute. She was absolutely frantic and hysterically called every one of her contacts to help. Of course, she asked me. She has asked me to babysit before and I always give her stern no. It's not the time that I need to spend, since I'm perfectly fine with swapping around chores, but the principle that I must be responsible for the child for the duration. For example, if the child hurts himself, no matter how badly, it would be on me. And I refuse to take the responsibility for something like that, so I always refuse to babysit. She begged and begged me, and since the journey to her exam is almost 2 hours away and she needed to go now, she just said, "I don't fucking care," and left the house. Frankly, I found this quite disrespectful as it's trying to push me to babysit without my consent. Right after she left, I grabbed my coat and also left. She was starting her car when she saw me and asked what I was doing. I told her that I was going to watch a movie. I lied. I just refused to babysit without consent. Her eyes dropped and I could see the tears forming as she started begging me more to help her. I still explained the same thing, that it's not the time or effort, but the responsibility. She told me that she would sign a waiver that states that I am 100% not responsible no matter what happens. I'm not an expert in law, but I'm not sure if a waiver is even legally enforceable. Even so, it still carries a responsibility risk, so I stand my ground. Eventually, she became quiet and started sobbing whilst hitting herself. I, as respectfully as I can, asked if there's anything I can help with that does not involve babysitting the child. She told me to fuck off, so I did, and I actually went to watch a movie. It's been a few weeks and she still absolutely refuses to communicate with me. She still does her share of chores and we were pretty separate beforehand, so it wasn't that much of a difference in day-to-day life. I do feel pretty bad since I've seen from the past 2 years we've lived together that she has almost no free time and always sleeps later than me and wakes up earlier than me to cram a little bit of extra study time. I know the exam meant a lot to her and missing the exam might jeopardize her entire degree of 4 years. It sucks that her efforts for the past 2 years have gone on the drain, but that's not an excuse to cross my bottom line. Am I the asshole for forcing my roommate to miss her final exam that she spent 2 years studying for?
Tender touch, drunk love, staying up, just talk to you. You stayed in touch, 2 continents, through all odds. Seems every night, yeah, all the time I'm calling out to you. Seems every time I take a drink, I'm reaching out for you.
Am I wrong for refusing to divorce my husband? I, 30 female, met my husband Dave, 32 male, when we were little. He's been my best friend since we were 10. We were raised in very conservative Christian families in the Bible Belt. He followed the script expected of us. Dated in high school, engaged in college, married after his graduation, and kids after I established a career. My kids are 5 and 3. We've been married for 10 years. We separated but stayed legally married 3.5 years ago because I finally admitted to him and myself that I'm a lesbian. Oh, Oh, ad nauseam. I thought that I could fake it till I make it, but I just couldn't do it anymore. It was strained for a while and we continued couples therapy. Ultimately, we both wanted to do the best for our kids. For us, that meant continuing to live together. He lives in the apartment above our detached garage because neither of us want to be single parents. Eventually, we both started dating other people and I met my girlfriend Krista a year and a half ago. She knew that I had kids and an unconventional co-parenting arrangement upfront, and I told her I was still legally married after 6 months of dating. She had been fine with our living/co-parenting style prior to this, but was less than thrilled by my lack of official divorce. She asked if divorce was eventful and I told her yes. Dave and I agreed we divorced when it was no longer mutually beneficial to remain married. For example, a new potential spouse. The longer Krista and I were together, the more my being married bothered her. She feels remaining married symbolizes I'm subconsciously clinging to my straight identity and is a barrier to moving on with my life, which I mildly disagree with but understand. She does not want to get married and had voiced the opinion that it was just a piece of paper, so I'm surprised it's become such a big deal. I agreed 4 months ago that I would bring it up with Dave and set a timeline for divorce by the end of this year to make her happy. 2 months ago, Dave's company downsized his job, and a week later he found out his increasing fatigue and illness was aggressive leukemia. He's undergoing treatment that is estimated to be 10% effective in cases like his, and they told him to consider that this might be terminal. If the treatment fails, they've given him 6 months to a year. For Krista, this changes nothing. For me, divorcing Dave now would make what is potentially his final months even harder than they have to be. Whether she likes it or not, he's a father of my children and my oldest friend. To force the issue while he's fighting for his life would be incredibly selfish and damaging to both him and our kids. She's telling me that not only am I regressing into denial about my sexuality by refusing to bring it up again, but also that I'm already a selfish asshole by leading her on, and that I want the best of both worlds by remaining married to a man while continuing to date a woman.